The moment Representative Grace Meng opened her notebook, the entire room shifted. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But what she revealed in the next few minutes exposed something most Americans never hear about: the slow, quiet dismantling of the very programs meant to protect the communities targeted by hate. And the most shocking part wasn't the cuts themselves. It was that the nation's top law enforcement official couldn't explain why any of it happened. She couldn't name the programs. She hadn't read the letter from survivors. She couldn't justify why the funds disappeared. And when Meng calmly laid out the facts, it became clear. This wasn't a minor oversight. This was a moment that showed how easily protection can vanish when the people in charge aren't paying attention.
Reporting, give community members resources in languages other than English, and to improve relationships between local law enforcement and the community. It was a direct response to the rise in hate crimes targeting Asian Americans during the COVID-19 pandemic. You may recall in March 2021, 6 women of Asian descent were tragically murdered in Atlanta, Georgia. My Hate Crimes Act passed through Congress in May of that year with bipartisan support, including from several of my colleagues on the other side of the dais. For years, I've been hearing from constituents about how scared they felt, and have been hearing from members of these communities as well as experts who've told me that one of the best ways to combat hate in this country is to fund prevention programs. So not just prosecution, but also prevention. I have a letter here that hate crime survivors and family members wrote to you in May, expressing their strongest concerns about the termination of these grants. Signed by people like family members of Emmett Till, James Byrd Jr., Matthew Shepard, and survivors of the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the hearing record this letter from these survivors and family members to Attorney General Bondi regarding the termination of hate crimes-related grant programs.
Without objection.
Oh, yes, without objection.
Thank you, Chairman. Attorney General Bondi, I absolutely share your support for our law enforcement and for the prosecution of hate crimes in a just way, but we must combat all forms of hate on all fronts, bringing together law enforcement and community leaders and members of the public. And these grant programs have helped many communities do exactly this. So I just wanted to ask and hear from you why there is a proposal to eliminate the 3 largest sources of DOJ funding for hate crime prevention programs.
Yeah, and Ranking Member, can you list those 3 for me again? And I'm sorry, I have not received your letter yet, but I would welcome working with you on any issue regarding hate crimes in the Asian American community, in any community. I welcome working with you on that.
Okay, yeah, I would love to, and this letter was sent May 15th, and we'll make sure that you and your team have received it. So the programs, one of them, for example, is named the Community-Based Approaches to Advancing Justice. 3 programs have been cut, and one of these programs literally help support our law enforcement departments locally, like our NYPD, to train and respond to hate crimes.
Let me see. So we have 5,800 grants, Chairman, that come, Ranking Member, excuse me, that come through my office. 365 have been cut so far. That's approximately 6%. What I will tell you is we have turned back on 13 of those so far because people have reached out to me. If you want to reach out and talk to me directly, I will give you my cell phone. I would love to sit down with you and see if we can work that out. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with those 3 directly. But again, we will, if you have on either side of the aisle any grants that you believe should be back on, I would love to meet with you and work with you on that. We're doing that on a case-by-case basis, and law enforcement is my top priority, especially hate crimes, violence against women, everything I've done my entire career as a prosecutor. I think we have a former prosecutor in the room too, and I look forward to working with you on this and seeing what we can do to help you.
Great, we'd love to work together, and we will flag all the programs that have been impacted, including those that directly support our local law enforcement like NYPD. And just to be more specific, the three programs mentioned are community-based approaches, Jabara Hire, No Hate, and Shepherd Bird, No Hate Shepherd Bird. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Gonzalez.
What makes this exchange stand out isn't just the policy disagreement. It's the stakes of what's being cut. These programs weren't ornamental or symbolic. They weren't side projects tucked into a budget no one reads. They were created because hate-motivated violence surged during one of the most fragile periods in recent memory. Communities were scared. Families were grieving. Police departments were desperately trying to build trust with residents who didn't feel safe. And Congress responded by creating prevention programs that didn't just chase crimes after they happened, they helped stop them before anyone was hurt. Grace Meng came prepared to defend those tools. But Pam Bondi, the Attorney General responsible for deciding which programs survive and which get eliminated, walked into the hearing unaware of what her own department had cut. And that's what makes the opening question so devastating. Meng begins quietly, almost gently. She explains that her constituents have felt genuine fear of being targeted, fear of going out, fear of being forgotten when the headlines moved on. She doesn't exaggerate. She doesn't sensationalize. She just lays out the truth. Hate crimes rose sharply during the COVID-19 pandemic, hitting Asian American communities in ways most of the country didn't understand. She reminds the room of something no one likes to think about anymore. The Atlanta spa attack that left 6 Asian women dead, an event that sent shockwaves through families across several states. For many Americans, that tragedy was a turning point. And out of that pain came actual legislation, not speeches. That's why one of the programs at risk, the Community-Based Approaches to Advancing Justice Initiative, exists at all. It wasn't created because someone thought it sounded good. It was built in direct response to what survivors and families begged for. Watching Bondi listen to this history reveals something unsettling. She nods politely but doesn't seem to recognize any of the details. And then Meng delivers the first sharp reveal. The Department of Justice is proposing to eliminate the 3 largest funding streams for hate crime prevention in the United States. Not enforcement. Not prosecution. Prevention. The thing every expert says is the key to reducing violence in the first place. Programs that trained local law enforcement, created language resources, funded community hotlines, and helped police departments understand the needs of marginalized groups, all gone under the proposed budget. When Meng asks the simple question, why cut these programs? Bondi pauses. She doesn't offer an explanation. She doesn't mention data, priorities, or shifting needs. Instead, she asks Meng to repeat the names of the programs because she doesn't recognize them. That is the moment the air in the room thickens. You can almost feel the collective realization. The person responsible for cutting these programs can't even identify them. And when Bondi says she hasn't received the letter from survivors, Meng's expression doesn't change, but you can tell the impact lands. Because this wasn't just any letter. It was signed by family members tied to some of the most painful hate crimes in American history. Relatives of Emmett Till, James Byrd Jr., Matthew Shepard, and survivors of mass violence at the Pittsburgh Synagogue. These are names that shaped civil rights conversations for decades. Names that represent the worst kind of targeted hate. Names that every Justice Department leader should instantly recognize. For Bondi not to know about the letter, and worse, to have no awareness of the 3 programs themselves, reveals something deeper than administrative oversight. It shows a gap in leadership that directly touches the lives of the people who need protection the most. When Meng lists the programs again, slowly and clearly, the contrast between the 2 women becomes impossible to ignore. Meng recalls policy history, legislative intent, and the real-world impact of each initiative. Bondi responds by pointing to the overall number of grants her office receives and saying only 6% were cut. But that number distracts from the real issue. If the 6% includes the most essential tools communities rely on, then the percentage means nothing. It's like trying to reassure someone their house is fine because only one room caught fire. Even if it was the kitchen, the heart of the home. The danger isn't in the quantity, it's in what was chosen. That's why Meng stays laser-focused. She names the Community-Based Approaches program, which helped the NYPD and other large departments train officers to respond to hate crimes more effectively. She names Jabara Hire in No Hate. She names Shepherd Bird in No Hate. These are programs nationally recognized. Programs built slowly over years. Programs tied to tragedies that shook the country. Programs that every major expert in hate crime prevention has praised. And the Attorney General is unfamiliar with all three. Bondi then offers her cell phone number and says she'll reconsider grants if lawmakers reach out personally. It sounds friendly, even cooperative, but it doesn't answer the core question. Why were these programs cut to begin with? Why were the prevention tools targeted instead of something else? Who made that decision? What criteria were used? And perhaps most importantly, if these programs are meant to stop hate-driven violence, why isn't the top law enforcement officer fighting to protect them? Meng doesn't let the conversation drift away. She brings Bondi back to the specific programs. She highlights that cutting prevention tools during a period of rising hate-motivated violence puts communities at risk. And she makes sure the public understands something crucial. These aren't niche programs serving a tiny corner of the country. They support law enforcement nationwide. They help departments build trust with communities that historically hesitate to report crimes. They provide education in multiple languages so victims can get help even if they don't speak English. They fund workshops, outreach teams, and early warning mechanisms that reduce violence before it escalates. Without these programs, the system doesn't just lose money. It loses its ability to prevent tragedies. As the exchange continues, an uncomfortable pattern becomes clear. Bondi consistently shifts away from the substance, returning to general numbers: 5,800 grants total, 365 cut, 13 reinstated. But Meng brings it back to the specific cuts again and again. She keeps emphasizing that these programs are the backbone of hate crime prevention. And each time she does, the contrast becomes sharper. One person knows the details, the consequences, and the names of the people affected. The other appears unaware of her own department's choices. That's why this hearing has resonated with so many viewers. It's not about partisanship. It's not about scoring political points. It's about whether the people responsible for keeping communities safe actually understand the tools they're taking away. And in this case, the evidence is hard to ignore. Meng presents the survivor's letter not as leverage, but as a moral reminder. These are the families who know the cost of hate-motivated violence better than anyone. They know what it means to lose someone because of prejudice, extremist ideology, or targeted cruelty. They know how easily the justice system can fail if prevention isn't prioritized. And when they write to the Attorney General begging her not to dismantle essential programs, that plea deserves at least a response. Preferably, it deserves immediate action. Instead, their words went unread. And that's the core revelation Meng exposes. The people most endangered by hate are raising alarms, but the programs built to protect them are being unraveled without serious thought. Communities begged for help. Congress funded the help. Survivors supported the help. Experts praised the help. And then, quietly, without clear explanation, the help was put on the chopping block. Bondi insists she cares deeply about hate crime enforcement. She cites her background as a prosecutor. She mentions her support for law enforcement. No one doubts her experience. But the issue isn't her biography. It's her decisions. Her own department targeted the 3 biggest hate crime prevention programs for elimination, and she could not provide a single substantive reason why. Not one policy justification. Not one strategic argument. Not one piece of data. If anything, the hearing shows she may not have been aware of the cuts until the moment Meng confronted her. But the real impact of Meng's questioning isn't the awkwardness. It's the clarity. She shows the public what happens behind the scenes, how easy it is for essential support systems to vanish when someone high up simply fails to prioritize them. And she reminds everyone watching that hate-motivated violence is not a historical problem. It's happening right now across multiple communities. Jewish Americans, Asian Americans, Black families, LGBTQ individuals, Muslim and Arab communities, Sikh families, immigrant groups. Many feel a rising sense of vulnerability. Cutting the very programs that help them report, prevent, and respond to these dangers sends a signal that their fear isn't being treated as a priority. That's why Meng's final comments matter. She tells Bondi she will flag the impacted programs. She tells her she's open to working together. She remains respectful, composed, professional. But beneath the calm tone is a firm message. These programs matter too much to ignore. And the people relying on them deserve more than a shrug and a promise of a phone call. This exchange reveals something viewers rarely get to see. Budget decisions aren't just numbers on paper. They determine who gets protection and who doesn't. They shape public safety. They affect whether police departments have the tools to build trust with the communities they serve. They decide whether survivors feel supported or forgotten. And when these choices are made without explanation, accountability disappears. Meng didn't let that happen. She asked the uncomfortable questions. She laid out the truth. She forced clarity. And she made sure the public saw exactly what was at stake: the safety of people who already carry too much fear. So if this video helped you understand the deeper story behind the exchange, why these programs matter, why their elimination is dangerous, and why oversight like this is essential, make sure you hit like, share this with someone who cares about justice, and subscribe to the channel. The more informed we are, the harder it becomes for policymakers to quietly cut the programs meant to protect the most vulnerable.